I get to introduce our speaker tonight, and I'm excited because our one community has grown and we are communicating a lot with AVMA. So tonight we have Dr. Craig with us. Dr. Craig is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at the AVMA, where she leads the organization's effort to foster inclusive and equitable environments across the veterinary profession. She joined the AVMA in 2022 after serving as Assistant Dean for Inclusive Excellence at Purdue University's College of Veterinary Medicine. Her background includes a Doctor of Education in Leadership from Spalding University, as well as a master's degree in Educational Leadership in Pan-African Studies. Throughout her career, Dr. Craig has focused on creating spaces where people feel seen, supported, and empowered to grow, both individually and collectively. And she's going to talk to us today about AVMA's platform, Journey for Teams. So please welcome Dr. Craig.
Right. All right. Good evening. Thank you for taking the time this evening to spend time with me. My title has changed. My title is a Chief of Veterinary Engagement and Belonging. And so that title has changed since the summer. And so I'll get to that, and you'll get to understand why it changed and why it's important for us to focus on belonging. All right, so thank you for having me. And for all of you that are on this call with us, I just want to say thank you to all of our veterinary technicians. All of you all are the backbone of the profession. You see people, you see things that others may not see, and you are absolutely important and valued. And I wanted to make sure that I said that to you and all of you who are a part of the veterinary team that help it to be what it is. So I do want to say that today's conversation I'm really trying not to make it a lecture. I really want us to have a conversation. But a part of this sort of strategy is I'm going to share some real examples with you, three in particular, of individuals that have used Journey for Teams platform and what it has been able to do for them. So do a little bit of storytelling there, and then I talk to you a bit about our platform of Journey for Teams and what it's doing. All right, so let's start with talking about what is happening in or across workplaces, and some of this information may not necessarily be new to you. So I just want to give some refreshers. According to Gallup in 2024, employment engagement in the United States has fell to the lowest point in a decade. 31% of workers describe themselves as engaged. And so what does that exactly mean? If there are only 31% of workers that feel they are engaged, look at how many workers are disengaged. All right. And when we're talking about engagement, we're talking about voice matters. We're talking about being seen, being validated. We're talking about having some sort of connection to the workplace, feeling considered. Um, Belonging is one of those things that we just don't talk enough about. It's sometimes hard to explain because the definition can change depending on who you talk to and how they want to be included and how they want to be seen and how they want to be validated, because that may not necessarily be the same for you as it is for me. So conversation is required in order for us to understand what does belonging truly mean so that a voice can be heard. When we say belonging and we talk about engagement, we also know that when you create a space for belonging, it is also linked to increases in job performance. You do more, you want to provide more, give more when what you are already given is seen and valued. There is a 50% drop in turnover risk when folks are being considered and a part of the full team, and that there is a 75% decrease in sick days when people are happy to come to work and connect with some of their colleagues. I'm sure that we probably have all had a space or a time when we just sat in the parking lot and we didn't want to go in because we just knew what that day was going to be like, or we knew the people that we were going to see that didn't make us feel good about what we were contributing and who we were. And so those things matter. When we say belonging, we're not talking about a pizza party. All right, everyone comes, everybody gets along, and it's kumbaya all the time. That is not realistic. When we say belonging, an example of that could be when a technician speaks up about a safety issue and they feel heard and they don't feel hushed and they don't feel rushed. It could also be two individuals that are in a lunch cafeteria room and they decide that a new person comes in and they make room for that new person who has just been onboarded to join in the conversation, and they shift the conversation so that that person can contribute. All right. It's when people know that they bring their best selves to work, they bring their expertise, and they bring their humanity to work, and they are respected. In 2022, there was a well-being report by the US Surgeon General, and in that report, belonging was one of the 5 essential human needs at work that are needed. The other ones were alongside of safety, dignity, purpose, and then work-life harmony. And within belonging, it was about the ability to be able to connect and form some sort of community. I think we can all agree that in veterinary medicine, stress is very much real. I did look at one of the surveys from NAFTA in 2023 that showed that nearly 70% of veterinary technicians report moderate to high burnout. And I know that that has been, that goes up and down depending on who you ask. And there is a large percentage of individuals that have considered leaving somewhat of the profession within 5 years. But here's the twist. Burnout is not necessarily about just workload. It is a feeling of powerlessness. When I speak with veterinary teams and folks that have one foot out the door, disengagement is always one. Respect is a huge one. We don't talk enough about it. What respect means to you may not necessarily mean what respect means to me. We got to have a conversation. It's about voice. It's about validation. It's about being seen. It's about being celebrated. It's also an opportunity for, when you receive burnout and you're not getting feedback about ways that you can improve and grow, you don't feel that there is a path forward in a particular position when you feel stuck. And so I hear that a lot. And so for Journey for Teams, what we did when we designed this program 3 years ago, the aim was to really return that sense of agency back to workplaces, to give teams tools to co-create their culture instead of inheriting one. Because a lot of times we'll hear individuals say, look, I didn't hire them. Yes, they're problematic. I don't know why they won't get rid of them, but this is who I have to deal with. I'm sure you've heard those comments. But that doesn't take ownership of, yes, this is who we have, and we need to have some accountability mechanisms in place to address this behavior, because we can't allow this to continue on because it's impacting everyone. And so initially with the Journey for Teams 1.0, we wanted to introduce certain concepts like psychological safety, like microaggressions, those concepts that can impact workplace culture. Individuals have to know what they are. How does it show up? And so the initial Journey for Teams iteration was about some of those DEI concepts, and those same concepts can reappear in organizational leadership literature, in well-being literature, in organizational psychology literature. And so the terms overlap because DEI is interdisciplinary. And when we go beyond DEI, we really start to talk about systems. How do these things operate within our everyday practices and policies? And how can we change those if it's not working for the people who should be at the center of it? Journey for Teams is a free resource. If you go to jft.org, you will have access to all of the resources. It is flexible, it is adaptable, and there are things that we kept in mind when we designed it. Time being one of them. We know that we are dealing with busy veterinary teams. And so the first iteration of Journey for Teams, it is focused on 15-minute micro learning modules. There are individuals that have done the work themselves, but there are teams that are doing it together. At the top of a staff meeting, they incorporate one of the concepts, and there's some questions that can guide them in that concept. And then they rotate on who's going to lead one of the JFT sessions. We also have industry, and certain groups within those industries have also gone through Journey for Teams. AVMA's board has gone through Journey for Teams. We also know that there are some boards within the equine veterinary practice that are going through Journey for Teams. And so we're very pleased with it. We now have over 33,000 veterinary professionals that have gone through or are going through Journey for Teams. And the icing on the cake is if you go through our Exxon platform, you can get CE credit, both for the first iteration, and then there's you can also get CE for the second iteration, which is on educational sharpenings. Let me tell you the difference between the two. The first one on the intro to the concepts, there is a 5 to 7 minute video. There is a topic guide that allows you to explore the concept further. But then there is I would say the butter of the program is a 3-2-1 worksheet, which gives you what are 3 things that I can take away from this concept? What are 2 things that I should consider? And then what's one behavioral change that I or a team can commit to after doing this particular module? We got feedback from several teams that said, I love the concepts. I'm still struggling with operationalizing it in everyday practice, especially when things are popping up. Some of the other feedback was we need more tools on conflict resolution. And so the second iteration, we came out with the educational sharpenings. And in that, there's about 7 modules. It looks different from the first iteration, and it gives you full-on exercises, reducing emotional reactivity, which is a huge one. If you are, there's a lot of chaos that happens on a day-to-day basis. And if people are emotionally heightened, how can you communicate in a way to where your emotion does not overpower the message? And so we have some information there. We also have how to be an upstander. Regardless of what is happening, there's always something that you can do. And then there's also one on how to be, what do I do if I say the wrong thing? It happens to the best of us. And so how do you go about that process without having to fall into the trap of over apologizing? And then the other piece that I also add is the whole idea of self-awareness. And why is this important? Harvard Business Review did a study and found that 90% of individuals think they are self-aware, but only 10% actually are. And so what we want to do is walk people through, how do you become more self-aware? What does it look like? And then how can I make sure that I am putting into play the things that I'm learning and it's landing in the way that I intended it to? And so we walk you through that process. So enough about Journey for Teams. So now I think what's more important to you is to hear about some of the ways in which Journey for Teams has been used. And I'm going to give you 3 stories because I know that I don't have that much time with you. In one of the stories that I want to share, there was this veterinary hospital, and I called this a sort of scenario, speaking up. They had an incredible staff, smart, skilled, compassionate. Over time, there was a problem, but no one was necessarily paying attention to it. But the people that it was impacted, they felt it. The veterinary technicians were constantly being talked over. It wasn't malicious from some perspective, and for others said, well, this is just the way things are here. It's habit. Rounds were fast. The doctors were pressed for time. Everyone told themselves, we're just trying to be efficient. But efficiency started replacing listening. And over time, what ended up happening in even some of these team updates, it became one-way updates instead of two-way dialogues. You had newer techs, newer folks coming on board, kind of caught on early to stay quiet. Even if you had veterinary students in the mix, they knew that there was sort of this culture of dismissiveness. One technician described it as later as, you really start to shrink in these rooms that don't have space for you. And what happens when people shrink? When people don't feel a part of the larger organization, not only is it 1 foot out the door and 1 foot in, mistakes get missed, things just start to fester, and things become a bigger issue than it could have been if you had addressed it at the beginning. Well, one morning during surgery prep, a technician noticed that a dosage was about to exceed what the patient's chart listed. And she started to speak, but she was interrupted more than once. She got frustrated. She ended up taking it to her lead in private and said, I don't want to embarrass anyone. This is happening a lot. I don't think it's intentional, but I do think it's unsafe because some of us do have important things to say, I being one of them, but it's exhausting trying to make my voice heard. And I want to try to tell people that these are some things that they need to watch out for. It's dangerous if I don't share this information. And her lead said, instead of them brushing it off, said, well, you know what? Let's then make this a teachable moment. I hear you. Let's do something about it. The team in their staff meeting ended up watching the JFT video. Now, how they came to contact with us about this, someone reached out asking us about my team. They're not talking to each other. They're over talking others. They didn't necessarily know what the name of it was called. We said, well, we've got this module on psychological safety. We shared it, and they had heard of it, but didn't know the term at that time. They watched the video with the team as a group for about 6 minutes, and it changed some things for them. And they talked honestly about how easy it is to mistake hierarchy for expertise. Someone said, I didn't even realize how often we tend to interrupt each other here. And someone said, you know what, it's not that we don't value text, we just move fast. And one of the leads said, I get that, but when you interrupt a warning, you interrupt safety. And that's where it landed. And so what they decided to do, it wasn't just a conversation great conversation, ooh, we learned something there and we moved on. What they wanted to do is, okay, how can we make sure that when we engage in conversations, that we can make sure that voices are heard? We need to do some sort of check process because this is pretty serious, especially with someone saying that they wanted to share information and got interrupted and couldn't. The group decided to come up with what they call a speak up script. And some of you may have heard it in other words before. This particular place did not have it. And the speak up script is, regardless of what the conversation is, if you say, I have a safety concern, 5 words, I have a safety concern. Can we pause? You pause, people listen, they hear what it is, and then they move on. And anyone can say it. It can come from a technician, it can come from a doctor, it could come from an assistant. Anyone who says those 5 words, you stop. What that did is it helped to drop in near miss incidents. It also increased engagement by a lot, because people felt that their voice was equally valued with others, regardless of positional hierarchy. And so JFT, psychological safety, was a way in which they was able to change that conversation around. We have another one, how to be an upstander. Now, in this particular incident, they had actually went through the how to be an upstander module before an actual incident occurred. So it wasn't a, here's the issue, let's go find a tool or resources that can help us through it. In this particular incident, the group had gone through the actual materials. And in one of the sessions, they ended up hiring for a role like 2 or 3 weeks later. I forget the timeline. And in that interview, as they're hiring for the role, the practice manager had asked the applicant if they could handle a fast-paced environment. And the candidate laughed and said, yeah, I can handle a fast-paced environment. I've been in clinics where I was the only one who looked like me. So I'm used to working under pressure. Comment went by the side, nobody paid attention to it. It was an awkward pause. But one of the interviewers chuckled and said, oh, well, no need to worry here. We're all family here. That's good to know that you shared that. But later on, after the interview, one of the folks that had done the how to be an upstander training said amongst the team of interviewers, they caught the moment and they said to the team, when we brushed off that comment, we missed the chance to really ask that candidate what her experience was like. That could have told us about how she builds trust with her colleagues. I would have liked to have known more about that, but I think it was a missed opportunity because I think we got uncomfortable and we just hurried up and moved on. The team heard it. It wasn't a sense of defensiveness when they heard it. They reflected on, you know what, I think we do tend to do that. We push forward quickly and we smooth over discomfort rather than learning from it. And so for this particular incident, it wasn't a call in. They were leaning into uh, what they learned from a previous module and was able to operationalize it and put it in place about how it was used. Um, and they've decided to add a question to the interview protocol, which was, can you share a time when you have helped to create a sense of belonging for someone on your team? And they got that question directly from Journey for Teams. And so those are practical ways in which people have used it. But here is one of my favorite ones and most important ones. I don't know how many of you have heard of stay interviews. It is, interviews have been on the rise, but a lot of folks don't want to do them because they're afraid of what you open if you ask questions. Stay interviews are the opposite of exit interviews. Exit interviews, when people are leaving, have decided, I no longer want to be here, you do exit interviews. The problem with exit interviews, people don't tell the truth. People don't want to burn bridges. You get very little information that's going to help you apply that to the current culture. Stay interviews are about listening to your employees about, what makes you happy here. What are some things that we can keep doing to make sure that, you decide to stay? What are some things that you feel that you need from us to grow? And so you're asking sort of those pertinent questions, and you're asking some of the same groups of questions to your team so that you can find things. Well, this particular workplace wanted to do stay interviews, but they were in for a rude awakening because they realized that they really couldn't implement stay interviews because they didn't have the foundation to support it. So they ended up changing some things in the mix of that to do some psychological safety. This particular practice manager told the team, I want to do stay interviews. Of course, the team rolls their eyes. Oh, God, what is this? What does this have to do with anything? Why are we doing this? You all barely listen. And one of the individuals on the team says, God, you can't introduce no good ideas here. People don't really want to say what they really think here. I don't think that's something that we should do. People are whispering, people are gossiping. I just don't think this is a good setup to do this. Well, that practice manager heard that, and it stuck with them because people started saying, you just can't speak up here. And so they decided, well, maybe I need to change the question. Let's talk about what makes it hard to speak. And so what they did is they decided to talk about what helps, what hurts. And instead of going to the stay interviews right away, because I always tell people, if psychological safety is not in place, then you don't want to do stay interviews because, one, people don't trust that you're going to use the information in the right way. It's going to have the same results as an exit interview. It's not going to be as useful. And so what they did with the short, really quick exercise, they wrote anonymously as a team, what helps me feel a part of the team, write it on a piece of paper. What makes me hesitant to speak up, wrote it on a piece of paper. And what the practice manager found in doing that activity is it wasn't necessarily just complaining, because that's what they always thought it was. People are always complaining. They never want to change anything. I don't want to open this up anyway because I'm not going to get anything but complaints. But it actually provided clarity for them in the process. Some of the patterns that they noticed on the documents that were written, there were folks that said, I feel invisible when we meet. It's like decisions are made 2 floors above me. Nobody is making the decisions that are being made impact my area, but nobody's asking me what I need. And then another person said, we only talk about mistakes, but we never talk about anything that we're doing right. And so when they tallied up those comments, the theme surfaced that there was an issue of voice, an issue of recognition, an issue of feedback. All right. And you can easily say alignment, especially when there's someone who's like, decisions are being made about what I do, but nobody's asking me. So what they ended up changing in that process is every Monday, they made sure to have a team member talk about either a safety issue or either a success issue to make sure that they were getting that information in. They wanted to make sure that team members were being recognized. So somebody was responsible for, posting a thank you note about one of the team members. And then one of the managers committed to one coaching conversation per person every month, short, two-way, and transparent. You had to speak as a part of this, not just one way. I'm telling you what's happening here. They noticed that there were differences in some of this feedback. And so when it came time to do the stay interviews, they had created the foundation and more people were willing to participate and be truthful about what they were seeing and what they were sharing. What we know about belonging and engagement is that you can easily turn these things, make it measurable, and turn these things into culture, because turn it into data. I hear a lot of people say, well, how do you measure that? You measure belonging the same way that you measure trust. All right. And you have to constantly work at it. With belonging, you can't necessarily measure it within numbers, but you can measure it within distance between people. When people are not talking to each other, you can feel it when you come into the workplace. How people communicate with each other, if it is communicating with people using grace and sensitivity, all of those things matter. And so I know that we are coming up on the 30 minutes. So I just want to mention the 4 things that you want to remember when you're doing this work. Voice matters, the ability to speak. You can measure that in participation numbers. You can measure that in the number of improvement areas shared. When it comes to value, when people are showing that they feel appreciated and they're recognized for their contributions. Observable behavior, peer-to-peer recognition or gratitude moments where people just are willingly want to share and they don't feel like they're forced. We know that recognition increases engagement, and the key to recognition is that everyone does not want to be recognized the same. There are some people that would rather have that private email than it being blasted around everywhere. So it's important to ask that question. How would you like to be recognized, and cater to that? And then visibility, being included in decisions and professional opportunities, representation on committees, rotation of meeting leads, inclusive rounds, all of those things matter. And then validation, which is knowing that your input and identity are respected and acted upon. I'm going to stop there because I can get into the details of the components of Journey for Teams, but I certainly wanted to be able to share with you some of those examples of how those things are operationalized.